Welcome to your Black World News. I'm your host, Roosevelt Mitchell III. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch has reported this morning that the autopsy for the 18-year-old who was shot and killed in St. Louis by two white police officers died from a single gunshot wound in the back. And if you can recall, earlier this week, police went to a home to serve a search warrant, and they alleged that two men ran out the back door, and one of the men pointed a gun at two police officers, and they fired 4 times, killing them. Chief Sam Dotson stated this: just because he was shot in the back doesn't mean he was running away. Okay, which is true. But Chief Dotson, let's also talk about the fact how if the man had pointed a gun at the police officers, why did they shoot 4 times and he didn't get a single shot off? Isn't that a little excessive? Even though he died from a single shot, that's still a little excessive for one person to already have a gun pointed at you and you fire off 4 shots before you stop. Just like back in the Westerns, right? I never saw 2 guys draw at the same time and one guy get off 4 shots, another guy don't get off a single shot. So for the guy to have pointed a gun at 2 officers, allegedly running in the alley, and then is shot at 4 times and he doesn't even get off a single shot, it's highly questionable. It's highly questionable. But the investigation is still ongoing, and here at Your Black World News, we will keep you updated. Until next time, my friend, be blessed and be encouraged.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse
you. Psychiatrist, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Dr. Welsing, welcome back to WOL Radio.
Yes, I'm glad to be with you, Carl.
And Dr. Welsing, I was telling you and telling those young men that you know the reason why young black men are being targeted by the police. Help us out here.
Well, Carl, it's almost exasperating in a way, not relative to these young people, but in terms of us as black people, that there's a huge elephant in the room, and we want to talk about the pictures on the wall or the window treatment. And we don't want to talk about the historic problem that we as black people, as African people, have faced in this area of the world. I mean, it's almost a sickness. It's a psychological sickness that we will not focus on and confront the issue. And I have to say that the most courageous political person, elected, appointed person, is the Attorney General, Eric Holder, the first black Attorney General of the United States. And he raised the question several years ago: are we a nation of cowards being unable to talk about racism? And more recently, when he spoke at Morgan State University, and he talked about even the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court saying the way to deal with racism is to ignore it and to not talk about it. That's at the level of the Supreme Court. But we have to hold ourselves responsible for not having the courage to deal with the big issue that is the cause of all of the other smaller issues that we are confronting as a people. And I say that courage is the first cousin of self-respect. And when there is no self-respect, or self-respect is at a sufficiently low level, there is no courage. And we have demonstrated that we don't have the courage to consistently talk about racism. white supremacy. You even have white people who are talking about it's a war, the Tea Party and people in the Republican Party talking now about a war going on against white people, where they flip the script. They won't talk about what is the historic relationship between people who classify themselves as white and the people that they classify as black. And there is an important article that was in the Washington Post yesterday. And the article talks about the number of white people, almost the majority of white people, who are uncomfortable dealing with the fact that there will be a majority of non-white people in the United States. This is an article.
Hold that thought right here, Dr. Welsing, because we got to take a quick break here, folks. 800-450-7876. If you're on hold, we will get to you. Our guest is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. You know her best from the ISIS papers, and she's also one of our power talkers. By the way, those DVDs are in the mail for most of you who bought them, and if you haven't, just go to my Facebook site at carlnelsonshow.com, and it'll tell you how you can get a copy. It's in high def. It looks real good. 800-450-7876. To speak to Dr. Welsing. We'll take your calls in about 2.5 minutes.
Those are war terms. And that's why you see police that black people think are supposed to protect them dressed as in military gear, as though they are waging war against black people, when black people are seeking to just project their concern about a young black man being killed. We need to pay deep attention to that. These are people dressed as though they are confronting an enemy. Now, what is racism and white supremacy? Racism and white supremacy is the local and global power system and dynamic structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival. Let me repeat, white genetic survival, and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth, a planet upon which the vast and overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white, meaning black, brown, red, and yellow, by white-skinned people, and all of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white-skinned people. So what we are seeing today, every week, it's another black male who's unarmed, who has been shot and killed. If not every week, every other week, or every other day. This is no different than in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, where black people were tabulating each time a black male person was lynched, and lynched and castrated, meaning genitals cut off. All of it is the same dynamic, this fear of white genetic annihilation. Black women do not pose a threat to white genetic annihilation because females, whether they're white, black, brown, red, or yellow, cannot impose sexual intercourse. That's just physiology. Males can impose sexual intercourse. Black people have the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation. And this is why black men have been historically attacked. That's why millions are incarcerated, to remove their genetic material from the population. Now, until we can talk about racism, what it is, then we will just go into what I'm calling now the cycle of insanity. And that cycle of insanity is kill a black male. Then black people protest and call in the spokespersons. The ministers come in to pray. Black people put flowers and have a funeral. And then they wait in vain for a court hearing to render justice. The courts don't render justice. Then there's a long pause, and the cycle starts again. White person kills a black male person. Black people protest, call in the spokespersons. The black people sing, pray, and shout. And the black people have flowers and a funeral. And then they wait for the court to render justice. Then there's another long pause, and the cycle starts again, because for sure another black male person is going to be killed. Now, I say the answer is not for black people to be out in the street acting wild, because that military setup that you see is what is being projected for black people. Instigate black people into rioting, then you can cart them off and put them in a concentration camp. What we need to be doing as black people, seriously saying we demand that racism, white supremacy, as the historic dynamic that has been impacting black people's lives, that it be given the same recognition that anti-Semitism for the Jewish people is given, that the same recognition is given to it as given to women not having their rights, or the gay and the lesbians and the transgenders. All of these groups and their specific complaint can be recognized, but black people's specific complaint of racism, white supremacy, the historic dynamic of which slavery was a part, that somehow we are not supposed to talk about that. The president can talk about the right of the Israelis to defend themselves, but he can't give his lip service to black people being terrorized. Our young black men are being terrorized, and older men, and women for that matter, being terrorized, fearing an encounter with police. And so if we don't insist out of having respect for ourselves and respect for our history, there has never been one moment from the first time a black person was brought to these shores during the slavery period. There has never been a break in time when black people have not been under attack. And we keep getting bones thrown out to us. We thought, oh, a black president. It's just like black people, when we were enslaved in chains, we thought emancipation is surely going to be the windfall. And emancipation came, and that was followed by black codes. And so then black people go through a whole period of protesting the laws and legislations that were holding black people down. And so we go through that and we think, okay, now that's over and the civil rights battle has been run. And then we end up with a black president that 90+% of the black people vote for, thinking certainly he is going to help black people. And he cannot utter the words racism, white supremacy. And so this is a situation that we are in. And it is time for us to be calm and to be serious, and older people helping younger people understand this is the war of racism, white supremacy for white genetic survival, which is why the men have to be attacked. During the period when black men were being lynched,
right.
They made no bones about black men. He might have looked at a white woman.
Right. Hang on a sec, Dr. Welsing. We've got to take a quick break here. We've got a traffic and weather update for our folks in the DMV. 800-450-7876 and speak to Dr. Welsing. We'll take your calls in about 2.5 minutes. And thank you for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. The number to call to speak to her is 800-450-7876. And if you're on hold, we will get to you. Also, we'll give you the list of where the rallies are going to be for the Day of Rage, as they call it, and hashtag Ferguson all around the country. We'll give you that in the next hour. But right now, let's go back to Dr. Welsing. Dr. Welsing, I'll let you finish up what you were saying before the break.
See, I would say we need to have a movement for racism, white supremacy. Policeman, they're trying to say he had scratches on his face, and and so he was being attacked by an unarmed black man. No, and every black person should get a copy of the book entitled Breaking Rank by Norm Stamper. Norm Stamper was a retired white police officer, I believe in California. And he wrote a chapter in his book about what white police officers think about black men and how they specifically are almost in training taught how to deal and think about black men. Now, his book ought to be on the shelf of every black person who raises an issue about police brutality. And furthermore, it's like just centering on the police. The police are the first line of defense for the system. We're not in a system of democracy. We're in a system of racism, white supremacy. Maybe it has ideals towards democracy, but you can't have equality and have white genetic survival at the same time. For example, if Abraham Lincoln, when he emancipated the slaves to save the Union, if he had made everybody, if he said, well, everybody is going to be equal, everybody's going to have the same absolute rights,